Okay, so we've got these, the main elements that are supposed to define the space in plan, even though I'm showing it there in a 3D view, which I've just renamed axonometric, so we know what kind of view it is. And of course, if I go back to the ground floor plan, we can see all of those elements, and that's where they were created generally. So again, the walls and the columns primarily define the space in plan, but then to enclose the space vertically, we need to have a floor and a ceiling. And actually, sorry, I should have taken the screens over. I can always forget to do that. I'll just do that if you like as well. And it's up to you where you want to watch it, but I don't mind. So, okay, so we've got, again, the plan view open there, but I might just quickly switch back to the 3D view just so that it's clear that it's not enclosed above and below. So I'm going to make actually a couple of floors. So for this space, you're working entirely within that tenancy, and it's going to have a floor that obviously you'll, well, almost definitely want to change and set your own materials to and work with as part of your design. Then you've got the surrounding area, which probably should have a different floor, just so that it's easier to manage and have a different material on that. Just want to point something out first though, before I make the floor. So remember, you can split the surface of a floor using split face. A lot of you might know that, and for bathrooms, where you have, say, bathroom tiles in a certain area, that can work. But be careful of that one. There is a limit to how far you can go with it. And so if you know in advance that you're going to have lots of different materials, or you want your floor broken up for those materials, sometimes it's better to make different floors rather than using split face. I will show you split face at some point, but don't rely on it for all of the different material breakdowns that you might want for your floors. And again, often it's better to make separate floors. So that's what I'm going to do. And so here, clicking on the floor tool, and very simply I've got pick walls on there. I've got generic 150. I'm not changing either of those things, but just pulling them out. And I'm just going to pick these walls and make sure I know which edge is being chosen. That's all determined by the wall. So when you have finished face exterior and you draw the wall and the exterior face goes onto this side maybe, that should be the edge that the floor goes to. But it may go to the inside, so just make sure you're aware that you can always click on the arrow as you make the floor to flip that line from side to side, and we do want it to go to the outside of the wall. And I'll just show you that again. When we go and pick the next one, you'll see you get the same option, and if I flip that, notice it's going to flip all the connected edges. So watch out for that one. If you notice that, well, I'll show you the next thing. So here, when I go to make, or pick this wall to make my edge, you'll see that it's picking the centre line, because curtain walls don't have a location line that you can adjust. So that's one where pick walls maybe isn't working well for me. So I'll undo that. And instead of using pick walls, you can always go to pick lines, which works really well most of the time. And I'll just pick that reference plane maybe. That works just fine. And the other option, of course, is just to draw lines, and there's no problem doing that to make the edges of your floor. Now, we don't want a bit of floor sticking out under the wall, so here we'd either need to bring that wall out if I'm going to use that reference plane. And I think I will, because yeah, that would make sense maybe. We'll say that's the edge of the tenancy. Right, just while I'm doing this is why we have that drawing there as a reference. Oh yeah, actually maybe, okay, so maybe the floor should stick out underneath. Yeah. Oh, okay, what's happening there? That's weird. Okay, so yeah, it's really hit and miss, that program. Okay, I don't think it'll come back. I'll just try again. I think it's lost it. So you might have to watch on the projector. Sorry. After all that. So, okay, so here though you can see this I suppose here's the edge of our tenancy, and it's one of those things where you really would need to go and look at the site and see what the construction's like. It's all interior, so there's no need for the floor to finish in any particular spot. I'd say in reality they wouldn't normally bring the floor finish out under here. It would stop at the wall. And but because this is the way it's drawn, we can always adjust it. So I'm just going to use that reference plane that we put there to mark the edge of the tenancy, and we can look at making adjustments later if you have to. So again, so you can always, instead of using pick lines or pick walls, just draw lines, and that works in many cases, probably as well as anything. And I'm not going to be too worried about all of this detail here. It's actually probably clearer if we just ignore that and go under, and so I can go back to using pick walls here and try picking maybe this wall and this one, and then use trim to corner just to join all of the lines together so it is a closed shape. With any luck this will be covered up anyway, but we'll have to have a look at what's happening there. And so it's a nice simple shape. Simpler is usually better for especially what we're doing, presentation drawings. And if we were doing construction, then we might do a lot of things in 2D anyway. So that's our 3D floor, and going into the AXO view we can of course see that base, and it's mostly so that we can get materials. When we start doing our rendering, we can of course have our nice materials set to that floor inside the tenancy, but then also we're going to see outside of the tenancy, so we want to have something out here. So this one's much easier, just making a new floor, and then I'll just use the rectangle tool and snap onto that reference plane so that it lines up with my other floor, and bring it out. And at a guess, I mean, you'd be surprised actually how wide the what's the word for them? Broadway? No, there's a word for the aisle in a shopping centre. It's not Broadway, but it's similar to that. Any other walkway in a shopping centre. They can be at least 10 metres wide, if not wider. So yeah, it's surprising how big they are. And so I'm going to bring this out a fair way. And then make sure if I make any adjustments that I'm adjusting this edge on the right. So this one of course needs to stay where it is, lined up with that reference plane. So I've finished drawing my rectangle so that I can then come back and select this line, and then I know when I adjust it, say I was going to make it a round number, let's say 9,000, it's going from there, moving that line on the right. We can extend this up and down as required as well, mostly for the perspective views, just so it doesn't finish off or stop at the edge of our views. And then later you might end up putting some walls and other things on this side as well, but for now that's probably enough. So very simple setup, we've got the floors there. And now of course if we make a perspective of the interior, we've got something underneath. From the shaded view we can see, and we can of course start putting materials onto that. And so maybe I will, just to finish off with floors, because floors I'm sure is something you'll all be pretty comfortable with. We'll have a quick look at a good material that I can use for floors. And so have I shown you a polished concrete before, doing the different angles of reflection? Oh good, okay, so that's what I'll show you. Okay, so I'll select the floor and go to Edit Type, and I'm going to duplicate and call it polished concrete floor if you really want to. And then I'll click Edit, and really we don't need to add in a new layer. We can just use that structural layer to our concrete. technically they do add in usually a screed layer, and that's what gets polished over the top of the structural layer of concrete. But in this case, you won't need to see that screed. So we can just do this, change this structural layer. I'm going to leave it 150 and change that material to concrete. So where it says by category, I'll click Browse. And then, well, I'll show you both ways, because I think I've shown you probably a few times that you can, of course, right-click on any of these materials and go to Duplicate. So you've got a lot of concrete materials usually in your starting template. So any of those will do, any concrete material. Going to change it, so this one, concrete and cement screed, any of those are. Right-click and Duplicate. And that's often a good method because it gives you a lot of the settings that you'd want. So if you can duplicate this, and I'll call it concrete polished. And so if you're going to do it that way though, you've got to remember when you go to the Appearance tab that the appearance is linked to the one that you've duplicated. And that's why you've got the number here telling you it's shared with that previous material. So if I change this, it's going to change the other one as well. So make sure, remember, you can either duplicate or replace, and that removes that sharing. That's it. That's the secret, yeah. Yeah. If you notice your materials are changing unexpectedly, it's usually that. Yeah. So that's the first option. And, sorry, go away. Exactly. Yeah. So that's the simple way. Duplicate or replace. They'll both give you a new appearance. Yeah, so I'll just do duplicate, that's the quickest way. So as long as it's a 0 there, then it's not shared anymore. Now this thing in the middle of my screen unfortunately can't go away. Yeah. That's right. Exactly, and that's fine. That's actually the other method. So it's fine. If you make a new material down here, when you click on that sphere and you can go to create new material, it just means that you have to put a lot more settings in. Yeah. Usually, yeah. But for some things, especially simpler materials, that works fine because there aren't many settings put in anyway. So, well, I'll just show you. So if I go create new material, it gives me a plain material that I can set up from scratch. There's only graphics and appearance, but you can always replace there as well. So spot the material, and I can rename that by right-clicking. So the main difference though is that the appearance won't be shared, and that's sometimes useful. And then actually is one other option. So you might have noticed there's a button up here that sometimes is highlighted and sometimes not. So when you turn it on, it brings up, it's almost another library. So this button up here. So that's another way of making a brand new material. These are all preset materials for Revit. So if we go to concrete and then double click on one of these, or you can click on that arrow, the up arrow there, and that adds it to your file. And that's another way of making a new material, but one that's got a bit more setup in it. So you've got all these folders with some basic preset materials. Notice it's locked, so this will be the same on every computer. So that's sometimes a good starting point as well. So you've really got three ways. The two last ones are just making a new material. But, you know, duplicating's fine as long as you know about the appearance issue, which is a bit maddening because there's no really good reason for it. I don't know anyone who works with shared materials or shared appearances, and even on really big projects, it's not that useful. But it's what the developers decided to go for. So I'll go back to the one that I started with, concrete polish, and have a look at the graphics tab. So one new feature that you might have noticed with 2019 is that you've got a foreground and a background for both of these now, for the surface and the cut pattern. So technically you have two patch patterns together. It can be useful sometimes, but most of the time you still only need one pattern. And so if you're only using one, just use the foreground. Or you can use the background, doesn't matter, but I usually use the foreground if I'm only using one. The background is just an extra option if you want to you don't have to use it. So you could have, so one maybe idea is if you want to have, if you use a solid colour as your background, and then you can have, so that can be pretty handy. It's good. And so, and you can even then have solid fill in like clear lines here, so you have something like an oil maybe with a colour that will always be there, and still get a pattern over the top. So that's useful. So it's good in the picture, but you don't have to use it. So here I'm not going to use the background, I'm just going to set the cut pattern to concrete. It's obviously seen, so I'm going to click on that icon and you'll see scroll, there's a concrete cut pattern, which is perfect for cut pattern. And I really recommend for the surface pattern, particularly for concrete materials, don't use a pattern at all. You don't need it. And it can slow things down and gets in the way and make them just terrible. So don't use those. You'll see a lot of them. Oh yeah, for the rendering, yeah, we'll definitely put them in the one. But what a lot of the preset ones have is often they'll have a sand pattern on the surface. It comes up in all the hidden line views and things like that. And it just looks bad and actually can slow things right down when you've got big files and big views. So I don't use surface patterns. Yeah, it's play. So if you notice there's one there and you want to clear it, you just need to scroll up the top and choose that no pattern option. Used to be with the earlier versions it was a button down the bottom, but they've changed it, so now it's that option at the top. So that's the graphics setup. Now go to the Appearance tab and set up the render or the appearance material, part of the material. So I'm going to right click on Appearance, go to Replace. Yeah, you can do it as many times as you want to. So, I mean, this is obviously concrete. It says concrete, and it is a concrete material. But I want one that's got a bit more set up in it. So I'm just going to right click here and go to Replace. This is only affecting when you right click on that Appearance tab. It only affects. No, you don't have to. No. But it's useful because I want to go to the library. That's all, to get a different sort of concrete. So this only affects the Appearance tab. The concrete polished is already stored. So if I go to Appearance and then brings up the asset browser. So again, this is another type of material library, but it's just for the rendering part. So the one over here, they're full Revit materials that have all of the tabs, that sometimes will be just the two graphics and appearance, but it can be all of these others. There's all these different settings that go into a Revit material, and the appearance is just one part of that. So here we're just dealing with that appearance or the rendering, and so it's a good reminder because you do have other folders here with these physical materials, and then you've also got the Autodesk physical assets. If you don't know what that means, or if you're not sure why it's there, don't use it. Because they're for people doing physical things, mostly thermal analysis. So environmental analysis and things like that, which we don't need to do. So the good reminder is there's an appearance library folder. We're trying to change the appearance, so that's the one you use. And it's the best one. It's got the most in it, and it's got the ones that look the best as well, I think. So once you expand that appearance library, you're going to see all these folders, and if you go to concrete, there are actually some pretty good concrete textures there ready to go. So the one I often use to start with is flat grey 1. So to bring that across to our polished concrete material, I'm just going to double click here. You won't see a change in this dialog box, but if you double clicked on that material and then you close it, you should see it back here on the Appearance tab now. So there it is. So flat grey 1, that's the name of course, and then down here we can see how it's set up. So it's actually, it's not even a concrete material technically, it's a generic material, but that's better for what I want to do. But the main thing is it's got this texture. So clicking on the image swatch there, you can see it's a obviously a photo of some real concrete. And that's important, so again you need to know that you've got to click on that image swatch to get these settings. I'll just expand it so that you can see all of them, and you've got a scale. And that probably is the real size of that photo. 550 mil, about half a metre, that'll be about right. But there's an old trick with rendering, or 3D rendering especially, and that is to oversize your textures. Oversize them, so make them bigger than they are in real life. And so maybe make it clear, I'll leave it this size and I'll show you how it'll look. So without changing... Pretty much, yeah, it helps with that too. Yeah, that's it, exactly, it does help with that. So you'll see in a minute. So yeah, definitely the seams are an issue. And so I've left it as it was when it came in. And you can see very clearly it's tile like nothing else. Yep, that's right, yep. And so that's all to do with, again, the seams are obviously what we're seeing, but also the size affects that. So when textures are bigger, the seams aren't as obvious, and you'll see that in a minute. And I mean, this texture is pretty much set up to be seamless. When you zoom in, you can't really see the joins, even though it's fairly obvious that it's repeated because there's some giveaways there. But again, any texture when you make it bigger, it's just one of those visual illusions. The repetitions aren't as obvious to our eyes. So, and while I'm doing it, I'll show you a nice little trick with the new version of Revit. Well, they brought this in a while ago. You might have wanted to click on a surface to select something. So here I'm clicking on the floor, but it's not selecting it. So in the past, you would have gone to the edge to find the edge of the floor to select it. And sometimes you have to use tab and do all those things, which is annoying. So they put this feature in down here, select by face. So if you turn that on, it's the one with the little polygon. Yeah. It's been there for a while, but a lot of people didn't know about it. Yeah. So that one there, when it's on, you can just click in the middle of a surface to select. And that's probably better for most people. I usually just have that on all the time. Select by face. Select elements by face. So that's a really nice option, I think, especially when you're working in perspectives like I do all the time now. So again, click on the surface and you can select it, and then we can go back, edit type, and go into the structure and have a look at the material again. So the first thing is to make it bigger. And like I said, I really like to oversize things quite a lot. So here, 500, that probably is the real world size. But I'm going to make it start with about 4 times that, so 2,000. That still may not be enough, but let's have a look at it. So let's click OK. Much better already. And when we render, even these seams won't be as clear, because we're going to have reflections and a few other things. So you can see how much better that is, even just by changing the size. And this column, it actually has the same material, and just because I can't stand looking at it, I'm going to change that as well. So, and it's a good chance just to look at the way, with floors, it's all set up in the type properties, but with columns, especially the structural columns, I think because of the way engineers work, they'll usually put it in as an instance property. So it's not when you go to edit type, it's just here, there's the material in properties. So I can still choose that column and then go and choose concrete polished. That's better. But now, if I go to axonometric, just so it's clear how those materials are set, this column is still using the previous material because, again, it's an instance property, which means each column can potentially be different. So you have to change each one. Good trick there, though, if you have that set up and you want to change all of those columns, just right-click and then you can go select all instances in your type project and change them as a group. But we wouldn't, have to do that with a floor because, again, it's a type property. So back to the concrete. So I've got the texture, the size I want. So that's all okay. And I'll just quickly look at some of these options just to make it clear. Watch out for the position. So sometimes people change that when they're meant to be changing the size. And that really isn't a very helpful option in Revit. Just because of it's quite a limited program in terms of the positioning of textures. You can control it, and they need to have that option, but it's not used as much as in the more professional like 3ds Max and other programs for rendering. So just maybe avoid that. Rotation though is a good one to know, so you often need to rotate your textures. And this one, tile, that's another option you should just avoid. There's no real need to set it to none. If you're going to have a single tile texture, there's better ways of doing it. So always leave that one on tile, for both horizontal and vertical. So mostly in here, you're going to be working with the size and the angle or the rotation. So then, coming down, we've got a few other really important options for getting that look of polished concrete. Just making this a bit bigger so you can see. And so, first one, glossiness. We just need to have that up a little bit. I'm not going to explain that one too much. It's actually a bit of a rendering trick or a cheat in the software. So we'll just move on from that. So I'm just going to drag that glossiness. I'm going to put it on about 30 and we'll maybe come back and adjust it, but for now it's just going to be up above 0 so that we can then turn on reflectivity and then have a look at how that works. And this is what's going to really give us that look of the polished concrete. Yeah. So you can see already it's got these shiny edges. What I'm going to do now is bring the direct reflections down. You can see that's going to adjust the preview a little bit, but we won't really see it properly until it's rendered. The general rule though with things like polished concrete is that you do want the direct reflections to be about half of the oblique reflections. And to relate that to something that you probably would have noticed when you're just looking at reflections in real world materials, think about what would happen when you look at something like polished concrete. If you're standing on it and you look straight down, you're not normally going to see your reflection. But if you look at an angle off into the distance, then you're going to see the reflections. Right, so they're the oblique reflections. They're the ones that are at an angle. The direct reflections are those ones that you get at 90 degrees, which you can control separately. That's what this direct setting gives you. So it just gives you more realistic reflections based on the real physical behaviour of these materials. So as you're adjusting those, you might need to bring the oblique up much higher if you want more of a polished effect. I will take it up a bit higher actually, maybe try about 60. See how that goes. That's going to be quite polished, but let's see how it looks. And then get the direct about half of the oblique. If you want it more of a mirror look, you can bring the direct up even higher. So I'll just try it with that. So that's all I'm going to change, leaving everything else, all the other ones turned off. And really important, leave the highlights on non-metallic. And that's enough. So I'll click OK, OK, OK. So it has changed a little bit here, but we really can't see how it's going to look probably until we do a test render. So let's bring that up. And we don't have a ceiling on, so I can leave it on exterior sun only and render. To get a look here at the reflections. Yeah, so probably a bit hard to see the reflections. You can see this is looking a bit shiny. Right, so I'm going to go back into my materials, and to save going through the floor each time, I'm going to now go to the Manage tab and Materials, and then that takes me straight to my concrete material, appearance, and we'll just bring this up even higher. Now, when we put the lights in, it's going to be different again. We might have to come back and fine-tune this a bit more, but with the sunlight, we should still get reasonable reflections. Also, the direction of the sun will make a difference, so I might adjust that in a minute as well. Yeah, okay, so my sunlight is coming from behind the camera, so I'm not going to get a lot of reflections coming towards the camera. So I'm going to just turn shadows on, so we can see the shadow there coming from that wall. Then I'll go to my sun settings and change it to still. Hit apply. That's more like it. So I've got there, without doing anything, that's a pretty good angle. 10 o'clock, if you want to use the same settings, 10 o'clock, 22nd of February. Obviously it knows the date somehow. There we are. It's funny, you can work out some things, but then the location, there we go. So that's too reflective properly. So I might even just put some quick bits of geometry, maybe even just Yep, whatever's there. So I've got a desk. You'll have that in your file. So I'll put a couple of those in so that we can have a look at those and see the reflections. And I might actually go and bring the sun around a little bit. So that's 10 o'clock. Let's go and have a look at 12. Maybe so. Maybe go to a difference 11. Okay, so we should definitely start to see some reflections now. I know when I put some lights in, they'll come up, but okay, so I'm going to go back though and fine-tune that material and just see if we can get some with the sunlight. So back to appearance. So the glossiness maybe is a little bit high. I'll bring that down a bit. And then the oblique, I'll bring those up fairly high, just to get those working. I'll leave the direct. Okay, so that's gone very, very bright. So I'm going to adjust the exposure and make it darker. Yeah, it's gone very matte. Yeah, it's a real balancing act. Glossiness, it's one of those things I wish they would fix, because glossiness, like I said, it's kind of a cheat. So it's tied in with reflectivity, but essentially it's not behaving correctly in terms of the physics of light, and a lot of rendering programs don't have this option anymore. They do it just with the true reflection settings. And it's something from the old days of rendering software, where you essentially had to use these extra settings to get a realistic look, because they couldn't compute everything. There we are, using ray tracing. So it's the glossiness. I need to bring that up actually. So it's probably a bit too reflective now, but it looks very shiny, and I'm not a huge fan of really polished floor surfaces, just because they're not really pleasant to walk across. I don't mind a bit of reflection. Yeah, that's it. So, and it's annoying because some of the most expensive, really beautiful to look at materials, like marble and everything, they look great, but for floors, when people, do these really expensive fit-outs with marble floors, sometimes think, maybe there's other options that are nicer from a functional point of view. But it looks great, so it's always something to think about. I always tell the story about the famous architect of the lovely Nazis in World War II, Albert Speer, the German guy. He deliberately put highly polished marble floors into many of the spaces that they'd used to greet dignitaries from foreign countries, to intimidate them and make it really difficult for them to have these big, expansive floor surfaces that they have to walk across with their hard shoes. And it was a deliberate thing to make it an uncomfortable space, even though it looked impressive. But it's always something I think about when I do those things. And it's a shame though, because from that part of the world, they've got a lot of great masonry, and it can be used beautifully, but also you can have some issues as well. So anyhow, so you can see there, now that we've got the reflections working, then you can come back and fine-tune those. And you can see, it's good to see that actually how glossiness and the reflectivity settings are related. You can keep fine-tuning those things, and you don't want too strong a reflection even with polished concrete, but definitely want to see some. But like I said, it will change again once we start putting artificial lights in. So don't go too far if you're testing it with the sun, but you can get something to work. You can see they've still got some nice sort of subtle reflections now, starting to work. And so as you put more lights in and more furniture, and again, because it's reflection, as you change the materials on your walls and your other elements, that's going to affect the way the floor looks as well. So it's a good thing to maybe start thinking about the setup for your floor material as you make your floors. Otherwise, making the floors should be fairly simple, just drawing the shapes. Don't be too worried about the actual edges of it. So I might give you some time to try that, and then we'll have a look at ceilings, which pretty much is easy.